This is a different one. This is actually right across the hiking trail from the original. This is much larger, and you can get an idea of probably how that developed. It's at the bottom of a very steep hill there, and when you get a lot of rain, that rain is just washing off down into this area where it's collecting and washing away the underground soil, and a sinkhole is developing. This is at Cave Springs. This is actually on top of Cave Springs. As you know, that area is owned by on top of Cave Springs, owned by the Nature Conservancy, maintained by them. And we were out there doing some cleanup of some invasives, and there's a big sinkhole, and they have covered it over, because it's possible, you can see the right time of year, you could be walking along and not realize that sinkhole is there. And it's a fairly deep sinkhole. This picture doesn't do it justice, but you can see in the middle of that sinkhole, it continues down into some sort of a cavern, probably supplying water to the water that is coming out of the cave there at Cave Springs. But it has completely eroded and weathered any rock that was there, and it is just a clear opening down into that cave. Most of you are familiar with this in Kentucky, right? The Corvette Museum in February of last year. Sinkhole, Toledo, Ohio. And you can see what caused this. Now, unfortunately, there's still a person in that car, right? You know, it looks like the ladder, they're getting down there. But you can see what caused it. Apparently, there was a busted water main. And that just washed away, you know, for a period of time, the underlying rock and sediment and everything else. And the road eventually just collapsed. You see, it's an old road with a brick that was underneath the asphalt in there. Toledo, Ohio. Florida, you know, probably the sinkhole capital of the world. This one got a lot of publicity, unfortunately, because the man in this house, which, you know, looks rather stable. Unfortunately, everything underneath that roof just collapsed down into a sinkhole. The man who was in bed died in 2013. This is kind of interesting. You may not have seen this. If any of you are golfers, okay, that's what these guys are. They had a foursome. Where's the fourth one? He's down there. He was standing, I swear, Waterloo, Iowa, 2017. He was standing, waiting for his putt, and the ground just opened up, and he just fell into the sinkhole. He was about 10 feet down, and this is a picture they got. Eventually, they got a ladder down there and got him out. He just suffered a minor shoulder injury. But that would be kind of a surprise, you know. You're sitting there waiting on your putter, and all a little whoop. And what about your friend? Where did Tom go? You know? Waterloo, Illinois. Again, Florida. This was a home, or actually apartment complex that was being destroyed. This was last year also. Winter Park, Florida. One of the most well-known and infamous sinkholes they had in the center part of the state, that's where Winter Park is, was in 1981 when this opened up. And this is gigantic. I mean, look at these cars. This was a Jaguar dealership. Okay, so a lot of Jaguars down there somewhere. You can see the municipal swimming pools got damaged. This is the main road that went through Winter Park. It was impacted, and an enormous sinkhole that opened up there. There's another picture of it from a different angle. Just an enormous sinkhole. What does it look like today? They made it into a lake. Sometimes that happens, you know. I mean, what they have to do, understandably, is plug the holes, all right? And they use different types of substances for that. They use a grout. They use cement. They use a lot of different things to plug the hole, and then they hope it won't open up again. You know, that's the idea, because eventually it's going to fill up. I mean, you look at that, it looks like a bathtub. But it did not open up again. Within about 3 or 4 years, they developed the whole area into a lake and a place that people could enjoy. So that's where the sinkhole was. Not too many places do that, but you don't have that many that are that large in size. There's an aerial view again of Florida that shows you, you know, all of the or some of these sinkholes. You can see how there's just thousands of them throughout the state in that limestone bedding that they have. Go into a store, you come out, and there's your car. At least they put shopping carts around it. You know, that was a 2-story house. Kind of interesting into the sinkholes. And you can see what it, not only does it, envelop cars and things, but you can see how this is limestone. And the limestone is the rock that is under the asphalt that they build the roads on. I mean, that's all they can do. They can't get rid of the limestone. That's what's there. Eventually it will be, it can be destroyed. It can be affected by heat, by weight, by a lot of different things. And when you get down to that limestone, then it is just an open season for water to get in there and to destroy it. Texas was very similar to that sinkhole that we had in Florida, right? That was in 2008. Again, look at the size of that thing. Here you can see some of the property around it. Now, I don't know whether this was caused by the water in the sinkhole coming out or whether that water came into the sinkhole, but either way, it is a large sinkhole and definitely affected the area. Brooklyn, New York, Salt Springs, Florida. You can see the dynamic. The same thing happens that causes all of these sinkholes when they have the limestone underneath, and it just washes away. China. People don't seem too concerned. They'll get it out. Now, Guatemala is fascinating. They have real big problems with sinkholes there. There was a 3-story office building that sat on this site. I don't know what happened to the people in it, but it just opened up, and look how deep that. I mean, that is a big sinkhole. 2007, you got all these people close by wondering what happened. Well, the same thing happened in 2010 at a different location. What's interesting to me, where are the people? They're way down here. They kind of learned their lesson. Let's not get too close to that gigantic, hole in the ground. But I mean, there's like no end to that. I don't know what the depth of that thing was. But you go online.
Round it is.
Yeah.
Pardon? Yeah. Yeah. Just completely, washed out. This is typically what you see. I mean, you can see the movement, how the water would be flowing down into the central area, forming that sinkhole, causing the ground to collapse. Here's one in South America that was a sinkhole. Eventually it was plugged up and used afterwards. Remember, we saw the park in Winter Park. Well, let's use the swimming hole now. As long as the plug stays in the bottom, that's good. If it comes out, the swimmers may have a problem. But again, very large in size in a cave. They may want to move soon. They were lucky this time. It's getting pretty close. Pretty close. Take a lot of sand or dirt and fill up their backyard with it. And again, out in the middle of nowhere, you just see sinkholes. So, and I know a lot of you have seen sinkholes. All right, let's talk a little bit about caves, all right? Because caves are as a result, oftentimes, of sinkhole activity. And what type of caves are there? There's more than one type of cave. First of all, the solution cave, which probably we're most familiar with. That's formed in limestone and the dolomite by the action of, as you might suggest, or anticipate, slowly moving groundwater. And most of the caves in the world are this type. But the lava tunnels are interesting. Let me tell you what they are, and then I'll show you some pictures of these. They're formed in lava when the outer layer hardens and the inner layer continues to flow, mainly in Hawaii and those areas, of course, where we have volcanoes, and they drain out through a tube, and you can actually see those in Hawaii. The sea, probably a lot of you have seen sea caves. They're simply, again, formed by the action of water attacking the rocks. And then a glacier, kind of the same thing as a lava tube, but it's formed by meltwater going through the glacier, and they form tunnels in ice. There's an impressive cave. Again, we're back to Slovenia, okay? But this is a solution cave, the typical type of cave that we would find, not necessarily around here, but that is an impressive cave, isn't it? Probably if you went to, Blanchard Springs, we were talking about that earlier. It has about that immense size to it, if you ever go to a cave, but that's an impressive cave in Slovenia. There's a lava tube. Remember we talked about the lava tube formed by the lava on the outer edge hardening, and then it still flows through the middle, acts kind of as water cutting through that lava, forming a tube, lava tube. Glacier tunnel, same thing, only what? Made out of ice. Interesting. Sea cave, you've seen those, but the big slab of limestone there and the action of the seawater coming in and going out. The tides eat through that limestone. We have a lot of those throughout the world. First of all, let me mention, a lot of people wonder, what is a cave? And there's a lot of definitions of caves. The one I use quite a bit that the U.S. Geological Survey says, and you think about this and it kind of makes sense. It's a rock formation that's large enough that you can stand up in, and you can go back far enough so you can't see any light. That's their definition of a cave. And that's pretty good definition. So it's large enough to stand up in, you can go back far enough to see light. Now, what happens when you can't go back far enough? You see a lot of, well, they're what? Bluff overhangs. That's basically the terminology or name they use for those places where you can walk a little ways in, but you can still see light. So, solution caves, the ones that are most popular and familiar to us around here. Some terms that you may or may not be familiar with. Speleotherm, that is another term for cave formation. So instead of calling something a cave, you can call it speleotherm. People wonder what you're talking about. You show them how I don't know. Speleotherm, stalactite, stalagmite, of course, you're familiar with. They're the calcite formations. They're either attached to the ceiling of a cave or they are attached to the floor of a cave that are caused by the calcium carbonate dripping from the ceiling. I'll show you that. And then the soda straws are the long, hollow calcium tubes that really are the babies of the stalactites. Here's what we're talking about. I'll go through this real quick, but you can kind of see how a cave can develop. Think about down here, where you have this disappearing stream, we'll talk about those a little later, cuts through the limestone, flows down to a point where there is sedimentary rock and volcanic rock that is just not permeable. So the water has to do something, water starts flowing. But when it does, it also eats through this limestone and will form a cave. So caves are formed by water, action. Whether it's water flowing this way or water coming down from the top of the limestone with that highly acidic form. Sometimes you'll see this in a cave. This is calcium carbonate. Whenever you see that white next to the iron, and that's just iron that's leached through the limestone. This is Onyx Cave up in Eureka Springs. But the white is calcium carbonate, which is dripping, continually dripping. And that is what forms, actually, the stalactites and stalagmites. There's the soda straws we were talking about. You've seen those. And that is just dripping again. Dripping liquid, calcium carbonate, calcite. And it drips and it starts hardening. And it forms these soda straws, which eventually turn into bigger soda straws, right? Again, calcium carbonate. Sometimes you'll see a bat in a cave. And then sometimes you'll see these gigantic formations that you look for in a cave, coming down. And what happens, of course, this is dripping, dripping, dripping. And while it's dripping, some of it will stay here, some of it will drip down to the ground. So it starts growing from the ground up. That's how you get the stalagmites, the ones from the ground. And, draperies, what they call draperies and things like that. But again, what I wanted to stress is that it's all calcium carbonate. That's all caused by dripping liquid. There's a very small one starting through the limestone. And, this looks very solid, but, you can see them. As long as there's a little crevice, as long as there's a little hole there, you'll find the dissolution of the limestone. There's more you will see. It's fascinating in cave. And there's one that's starting from the ground up. You can see the calcite or calcium carbonate has been caused by dripping from up above. And it's starting to form the stalagmite from the bottom of the cave up to the top. Same process, actually. This is a winter shot I took. I thought it was kind of interesting. Same thing happens with ice. This is being formed by this dripping ice right here. And it forms an ice crystal, or the same thing that you see in a cave. All right, boxwork. What is boxwork? Have any of you ever seen boxwork? There's a cave in Wind Cave in South Dakota that has a lot of boxwork. It's fascinating. It's nothing more than limestone. It's kind of honeycomb-shaped bins that's formed when the groundwater carrying the chemicals eats through limestone in a different way than we usually see it eating through. Forms these very pretty formations called boxwork. But it is nothing more than dissolved limestone, and it leaves what they call them calcite fins. So instead of the dripping, calcite or stalagmite you see, it forms this kind of cobweb type formation. Like I said, Wind Cave in South Dakota has probably the largest boxwork, BOXWRK, in the country. But actually, we have some out at Blowing Springs. Have you ever been out to Blowing Springs in Bella Vista on the trail out there? Look around. That's where I took this picture. This is a type of boxwork in the limestone. Kind of interesting. All right, I forgot to bring my file on this, and the reason I wanted to bring it, are many of you familiar with the Narrows? Ever been to the Narrows? Okay, Narrows is a fascinating place to be, but you have to have specific directions to get there, and I forgot to bring my file to give you those directions. If any of you are interested, see me afterwards, give me your email, and I'll send them to you. It is an area, it is just east of Mountain Bird, off of 71, all right? This is the road up here, so it's under a road. And it looks just like, what would you say, a bluff area, right? But here's what's unique about it. All kinds of petroglyphs, all right, that you can see. And it's not protected, it's not, how they have avoided, the vandalism in the area, I think because not a lot of people know about it. There used to be a town in this area, a very small town or village called the Narrows. That's where it got its name. And if you look on a map, you'll see the Narrows indicated kind of as a town in that area. But it's just a fascinating place if you like to, explore. Like I said, this is the road. The turn comes off of 71, and it's about, I got the exact distance because there's really no place to park. You can park off the side of the road, on the other side of the road, and then you have to walk up about 75 feet until you find a stairway, and there is a rock stairway down to this area. Not dangerous from that standpoint. It's easy to get to. I mean, this does not fall off, 300 feet or anything. It just falls off into a little collar down there. But it's called the Narrows, and really interesting place. Down there. You can just go down there and hang out, to your heart's desire. Called the Narrows. All right, this is kind of interesting. This is a map, of course, right, from Fayetteville, Springdale, on up to Bella Vista and that area. And if you ask those people, they say, well, 49 goes straight up. It doesn't go straight up, does it? It bends out. If you're driving in the morning like I was coming down here, you're coming down from Rogers, and all of a sudden you're looking into the sun. And you went, wait a minute, I'm going east now. What's happened? Well, it bends out, doesn't it? It bends out starting about Wagon Wheel Road and ends about Pleasant Road around that area. Why is that? Anybody know? Water. Why does it go east at Cave Springs and Lowell? Because of one thing, cave fish. The cave fish in Lake Keith, wasn't known as Lake Keith, in Cave Springs, okay? Right over here. When they were building the road, they did an environmental study and realized that having cars, leaking oil, all kinds of things, it was going to impact the water source here, and it was more likely to impact the cave fish that were in Cave Springs. So they just boated out around it, which is, you have to give them credit for that. Interesting, this was in 2012. The headlines are, Endangered Spider Halts and Reroutes Construction of $50 million Texas Highway. So they had the same issue in Texas with an endangered spider that they had to make amends for. So, all right, this is Cave Springs. Now, these pictures were taken before Cave Springs was changed the way it is now. With Delia Hawk and her group buying the property, which is just fantastic, that whole project out there. Actually, this water wheel has been taken down. You can still see it, but it's been moved. Really, it was too much to deal with. It couldn't be rebuilt. But this is the water that comes out of the cave, in Cave Springs. Remember I mentioned to you about that sinkhole? Well, that's way up here at the top, back a ways. But this is spring water that comes out of this cave, about 9 million gallons a day, I think it is, maybe an hour. I'm sorry, not sure which one. There's a lot of water that comes out there, and it formed. This used to be a trout fishing area. They've torn these buildings down now, but that's what that area was, a trout fishing area, and it was called Lake Keith. They changed it now. Now the Illinois Water Authority has taken over. They've just recently changed it to Partners Lake, P-A-R-T-N-E-R, Partners Lake, because of the various groups that are involved in restoring the lake. But just a fascinating area, and of course this is where the cave is, back here, and supplies all of the spring water from the cave. But there's the guy that resulted in the road being changed, the Ozark cavefish. It's estimated that 75 to 80% of the Ozark cavefish in Arkansas are found in Cave Springs. And about the only other place that they have found them is in Yellville. If you're familiar where Yellville is, there's a creek that goes through that town, and they have documented 2 cavefish that have been found in that creek. They, of course, spend their whole life underground without light. That's why they have the light pigmentation. They are blind. They don't need to see. They don't have anything to see. They're never exposed generally to sunlight. But that's the Ozark cavefish. Also, things that you'll find in caves in a karst topography are cave crayfish. They are kind of unique. They might look like other crayfish that you see, but they are unique to a cave environment. And the blind crayfish, which again had a white pigmentation, generally are blind, are not exposed to light. The cave salamander, which is interesting, and you oftentimes will see these. If you go out to a commercial cave early in the morning before they've opened up, and one of the best ones to go to that I would recommend is Bluff Dwellers Cave on 59, just over the line in Missouri. People there are so nice, and if you get there and ask them, can I follow you around when you open the place? When they open the doors, they go through it every morning with a flashlight, see what's out there. And all kinds of these cave salamanders are walking around. The slimy salamander, the dark salamander is walking around. Generally, they're near the front door or near the door to the cave. For some reason, they do go in and out of the cave, but they spend much of their time inside a cave. Cave cricket are unique to caves. Again, they will go out at night. They do not chirp. One thing unique about the cave cricket, they don't chirp. All right. So if you go to a cave, check out some of the critters that are inside that environment, because it's absolutely fascinating. This up again at Roaring River State Park, you often see a cave kind of like this. This would not, we call it a cave. It's a bluff dwelling because you can't go that far in it. So I'm looking back in the cave, and a couple of bats we saw. No problems with disturbing them, because this was during the summertime. They were not, hibernating. Got in, took a picture real quick, got out. But I want to talk to you a little bit about bats. Okay, we're going to talk about a little bit about. There's a bat. Bats are fascinating creatures. We have to have bats. If we didn't, we'd be overrun with mosquitoes. We would be overrun with farm pests, agricultural pests. Farmers love bats because of the critters that they eat. But I don't have a. That's a healthy bat. That's a bat that's not so healthy. That's a bat with white nose syndrome, and you've heard about that. They've seen about it. It was discovered in 2006 up here in a cave by Albany, New York. Okay. And this is as of, you can see, September 2014. Forget about the different color, all right? All of those places are caves or hibernation sites where white nose syndrome has been confirmed since September 3rd, 2014. Estimated about 6.7 million bats have died as a result of that since 2006. As you can see, it comes down here in Arkansas. All of our caves in Arkansas have been closed since 2010. All of the public caves. Private caves you can't close. You have to rely upon them to be good citizens. War Eagle Cavern, for example, the last 2 years I know they closed their cave from November to March, which is the hibernating season of bats. And some interesting, let me go back to this picture. This is the fungus. The fungus does not kill the bats, as some of you may know, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you thought it did. What happens, bats are true hibernators. Bats that hibernate for the winter, and that's only about 40% of the population of bats in the United States. They build up their food stores, they go into a cave, and they just don't move for 4 months during the winter time, approximately. Well, what happens, they get this fungus on them, and they begin to itch real bad. It wakes them up. They start using their food stores. They go outside looking for food source. It's cold, it's freezing, there's no mosquitoes, and they die. So that's what kills them. They've used up all of their food stores, they can't get new food, and they drop dead. So most of them are found, when they do find them, outside of caves where they have gone. What do they know about white nose syndrome? Some things, but not a whole lot, surprisingly, since 2006. They know it's a naturally growing fungus, which means it grows on the ground. So they speculate it has been taken into caves by people visiting caves, either on their feet or on their equipment. Okay, that's why they've closed the caves. They do know that it can be spread by bats from one cave to another. Like I said, it only affects hibernating bats. I've asked the question, what about the bats in Austin, Texas, under the Main Street Bridge there? Not going to affect them at all. They are not hibernating bats. I was talking to a biologist a couple of weeks ago, and I asked, what about Carlsbad Cavern? Because you look at that picture, and it's moving, this way. They said, probably it is gone as far west as it's going to go. It's into Oklahoma, but when you start moving out of Oklahoma, you get into some warm climate, and you don't get that many hibernating bats this side of Oklahoma. That's true. It's not going to affect, hopefully, Carlsbad Cavern. It is going north. It's getting into Wisconsin and into Minnesota, into those states, but we may have seen the far western edge of white nose syndrome. They have had it in Europe, all right. They had it before it came here. In fact, they speculate that it may have come into the United States through Europeans visiting some of our caves. This is interesting. There has never been a disease that has attacked wildlife that humans have ever been able to control. Think about that. Never been a disease that attacked wildlife that humans have been ever able to control. So they have to rely on what? On the bats getting through this themselves, through their immune system. Well, why aren't they successful? Mother Nature has problems, and sometimes we cause a bigger problem than Mother Nature created. You know West Nile virus? What caused it? Mosquitoes. How did we fight it? We sprayed insecticide on mosquitoes. And who eats the mosquitoes? The bat. So the speculation is that as a result of that process, the bats their immune system has been lowered. Their ability to fight off disease has been lowered. And they just got to wait until they can build it up again. That's all that can be done. Just wait until they build up. There's nothing can be sprayed or, we don't want to get into that again. Nothing can be done. So that's why generally all the states where they have white nose syndrome have closed their caves and, prevent people from coming in. So that's kind of a long explanation, but it's interesting. Let's see, this was in July of last year. The U.S. Forest Service lands in Arkansas will remain closed at least till 2019. All right, so none of our caves are going to open before 2019, in case you're wondering. When are these caves going to open again? It's going to be a long time.